to the real story down there, which is the halo on the Formula 3 car, America's car, which is the only single-seater in America to have the halo. And it's an interesting one because this is a steel halo, and it's been made by Dave Cooper of Ligier. And Ligier basically build the Formula 3 and the Formula 4 cars. And there's kind of a sad story to all of this because the cars were designed by Andy Scriven, who's a great guy with a lot of racing history back in Europe. He was certainly at Pro Car when I was involved with Brabham. I say Pro Car, that was that funny sort of Formula 1 car with a shell on it with an Alpha engine that Bernie Ecclestone was building for a while. And they never raced. I think it was '89 they were doing that. And Andy was involved with that. And I know he worked for Walkinshaws as well. And he did a few other pretty cool things in England. Then he went to America and he worked with Crawford Composites, which was a really big, successful company for a while. And then more recently has been involved with Dave Cooper's company, which is basically part of the Ligier group. And he was designing these cars. Really cool guy, Andy, and he was very keen on triathlons and so forth. And he, you know, a bit like Bob Wallach, he was out riding and on a bicycle and was hit by a truck. It was just about a year ago, just before the US Grand Prix last year. And he actually lived through to December when he sadly passed away due to an infection as a result of all the injuries. And so sad. So he was in the middle of all that project. And obviously that was a problem for Ligier. So the Formula 3 car was very late in its appearance. And in fact, the championship only started in August, and there are only 6 cars in the race here in Austin. But that was because there are only about 6 cars anyway. So they're just getting it off the ground. But next year, they reckon there'll be at least 20 cars on the grid, Formula 3 grid, if not more. So we shouldn't knock it. It's very easy to be in the high altitude of Formula 1 and look at a timing board and see there are only 6 starters and scoff at it. But that's the story behind it. That's why there are only 6 starters, very late in starting because of Andy's accident. But one of the guys who helped with the design to get the car on the road and to get it finished was none other than Kenny Anderson, with whom I was hooked up to do the USF1 project. Good guy. And he came and did a lot of the detailed design to get it finished. So good on Kenny for doing that. And Dave Cooper, of course, who I bumped into in the paddock. And that's how I know all this stuff, because Dave used to work with me at Ferrari when I was running the GTO operation in 1990, taking it over from John Barnard. And that's a story in itself, because in October, we went down, I was with 2 or 3 Ferrari officials, and we went down to the facility to look at it, met John, he showed us around. About 55 people there from memory, and we did carbon, fabricating, machining, building the chassis, basically, everything except the engine and gearbox. And that was good, met them all. Went down to start work on November the 1st, and we had to build 5 Formula 1 cars with modifications, design modifications by Ian Thompson and Enrique Scalabroni. By February, basically, big panic. And I went there November 1st, nobody there, completely empty, apart from 2 people, Dave Cooper and a guy called Pasquale, who's a machinist, fabricator. Everybody else had gone with Barnard to Benetton, so that was not very nice. And so we had to hire people like crazy, and we did get the cars built, and I think they were great cars. As you know, Nigel Mansell, Alan Prost won few races in 1990. It was very good. Anyway, that's where I knew of Dave for the first time. He was just brilliant in that period. What a great fabricator he is. And now he's senior player in this whole project for Formula 4 and Formula 3 in America. And he said, look, you know, let's do a halo out of steel rather than the titanium carbon ones that you have in Europe. Be much cheaper, and anyone can do it. It's us in Mooresville, center of the whole steel tubular world. And they did. And Dave used to work at Benetton and also at Force when Ross Brawn was at Force. And Ross knows him well, obviously has a lot of respect for him too. And when Ross heard that Dave had done these steel halos, he made a beeline to go and look at it and said, wow, thumbs up, mega. And beautifully done, as you can see. And the point about it all is that those halos, effectively the addition of the halo to whatever design you got. works out at about $3,500, as distinct from the $35,000 to $40,000 that we're having to spend in Europe to have all the halos on the production race cars. So a good bit of technology there, and a nice bit of really good workmanship by Dave Cooper, who in my mind is a real star. And these guys, people like Dave, very hard to find these days. Probably they're there, but you know, he's a real artisan in the true sense of the word. He could have easily worked at Ferrari in the 50s and 60s and run the entire fab shop there. Another guy who was interesting was Corey Enders, who is here talking to Josh on the right. They hadn't actually met, and they were chatting away, and they had a big race, big dice together the next day, so there they are. Corey is part owner of a team, really hard-working, intelligent guy, and he is also very, very good at chess. I mean, he's a serious chess player, which is unusual, I think, for racing drivers. And he's racing 4 different types of cars in 2019, I think, as I understood it. I'm a bit confused by that whole Road to Indy program they have in America. But what I do know is that Mazda are pulling out. So it's not quite the same. But you can run different categories. 2000 Star Mazda, Pro Mazda, Formula 4, Formula 3. Anyway, Corey is a guy that looks like he's going to be around motorsport for a long time and knows what he's doing. Intelligent guy. And then there was James Raven, who I remember hearing his name a couple of years ago, club racing, basically in Formula racing in the UK. Typical, very good young English driver. A bit like Matt Cowley, who found that the money you needed to go up the ladder was too much in the UK. He's out here racing in the States in Formula 4 and doing really well. I mean, he was unlucky not to win race 2. He's right on the pace. And just good to see an English driver out there with broader horizons than most, using his imagination really and getting on with it and being a race driver. So that was, you know, that's what this new category is offering, I think, a lot of Europeans, and we'll see more and more coming over. And there's even talk of having a Formula 2 now as well as the Formula 3 with the same manufacturers. And if that happens, I think there'll be a lot of Europeans coming over from straight from F3 International, because at the moment the cost of Formula 2 in Europe, at 1.8 million euros for a season, is prohibitive. And a lot of drivers are thinking of going to Japan, Super Formula, which has slightly smaller budgets. But if there's something that's really economical under the Formula 2 heading in the United States, then that's going to be very appealing. So a lot going on in that support paddock. Kyle Kirkwood is a good driver, and here I should mention Jeremy Shaw, because his scholarship, Team USA scholarship, has produced some really, really great talents, and good luck to Jeremy for doing that. Kirkwood has been quick this year. He won both Formula 3 races at Austin, admittedly only 6 starters, so it didn't mean much, but he's done a lot of winning this year. So here he is in the Formula 1 paddock. Didn't attract a lot of attention, of course. Formula 1 always too busy with other things, but I think he's a guy with real potential. And here's a nice thing. Balta Leguizamo is an Argentine driver who is interesting because his father is obviously quite well connected, and because he's involved in discussions at the Liberty level for the return of the Argentine Grand Prix in 2020 at the Parque Almirante Brown. Wouldn't that be nice? Missed that race like crazy. So he's racing Formula 3, and the cool thing about this is that his car is exactly the livery of the ACA, Automobile Club of Argentina, Brabhams, that came over to Europe in 1970-71 with Carlos Reutemann and teammates Benedicto Caldarella and Carlos Roig. And they were, you know, for everyone involved with that program and in New Formula 2 at that time, those cars were iconic, white with the yellow stripe, the black pinstriping, and interesting to see Balta has got exactly the same livery, so good on him. Here he is. Actually, I saw him, we caught up with one another driving to the track, I think on Saturday morning, so here he is. Hey there, hola. He's a good driver and didn't have any luck. Everything went wrong actually in Austin for him, but he's a good guy, good driver, and we'll continue to hear his name as well, I think. It was a good win for Christian.
Excuse me?
It was a good win for Christian in the Formula 4 race.
Christian Rasmussen, yeah.
Do you know him?
Yes.
How do you know him?
He's good friends with my little brother, so you know, I've seen him. He's been to our home with my little brother a couple couple of times, so I know him a little bit.
Have you seen him karting or anything like that?
No, I didn't know him when he was in karting. I've only known him since for a year or something.
Yeah.
So he's a good kid.